So the Philippines pledges to back the U.S. if the Ukraine conflict should spill over into Asia. That's what we're going to be talking about today, so stick around. Hey guys, before we get started with today's video, if you'd be so kind, please give the video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps the channel a lot and we really appreciate it. So without further delay, let's get on with today's video. Alright guys, welcome back USA to Philippines Life channel with your host, me, Mike. And today we're going to take a look at an article that I found. There's actually several of them. I posted one or two of them on the Facebook group. Again, if you're not a member of the Facebook group, please join. I post these articles as I come across them. I also put them in the community section of the channel. But on to this one. Now, this one is out of the diplomat.com. I came across it. Again, the title is "The Philippines Pledges to Back the U.S. if the Ukraine Crisis Spreads to Asia." Now, I would assume they mean something like a World War scenario where China would start doing its thing, as was the case with Germany and Japan in World War II. So hopefully, God forbid, this should go this way. But obviously, the president of the Philippines is not discounting that possibility. And I believe it's wise for them to consider that possibly happening. And again, as I had spoken of, those speed bumps that we might have, although things have gotten great post-pandemic with the Philippines opened up and people are heading back there and things are returning to normal. But anyway, so let's take a look at this article. I'm going to flash it up on the screen so you can read some of it along with me. But let's take a look at what they're saying. And this came out on March 11th. The Philippines says it is ready to open the country's military facilities to America should the conflict in Ukraine spread into Asia, the country's ambassador to the United States said yesterday. Ambassador Jose Manuel Ramaldez told reporters during an online forum that President Rodrigo Duterte made the remarks in a recent meeting in Manila. If the U.S. asks for support, the shoot-from-the-hip president was very clear that if push comes to shove, the Philippines will be ready to be part of the effort, especially if this Ukrainian crisis spills over to the Asian region. Specifically, Ramaldez said Duterte indicated in the event of an emergency situation, the Philippines would allow the U.S. forces to return to the formal naval station at Subic Bay and nearby Clark Air Base, gargantuan U.S. facilities that were mothballed at the end of the Cold War. He offered that the Philippines would be ready to open its doors, especially to our ally, the U.S., in using our facilities and any facilities they may need, Ramaldez said. The Philippines has condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine and voted in early March in favor of a UN General Assembly resolution that slammed the attack and demanded an immediate withdrawal of all Russian troops from Ukraine. Under the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty, or MDT, between the Philippines and the U.S., which I will post the article, a link here. They're offering a link to the full text of that treaty in case anybody would like to check that out. Again, between the Philippines and the U.S., the two countries pledged to aid each other in the event of an armed attack in the Pacific area on either of the parties. Exactly how the Russian-Ukraine conflict might spread to Asia is unclear, but the pledge to support the U.S. in any conflict in Asia would appear to extend beyond the text of the treaty. According to Article 5 of the MDT, an armed attack on either of the parties is deemed to include an armed attack on the metropolitan territory of either parties, or on the island territories under the jurisdiction in the Pacific Ocean, its armed forces, public vessels, or aircraft in the Pacific. Since any conceivable extension of the Ukraine war in Russia would unlikely to involve the direct attack on either the Philippines or the U.S., this promise of support would seem to amount to a pledge to come to Washington support in potential Asian theaters that may not directly impact the Philippines. The pledge is all the more surprising coming from an administration that has been ambivalent, to say the least, about its treaty alliance with the United States. Since taking office in 2016, Duterte has lashed out at the U.S. for criticizing his bloody war on drugs, and has tacked sharply, if inconstantly, toward China, despite Beijing's ongoing assertiveness in the South China Sea. In early 2020, Duterte announced his intention to scrap the Visiting Forces Agreement, an important supplementary pact that lays out rules for the deployment of U.S. troops in the Philippines. In a fit of pique after a close ally was refused a U.S. visa, but Duterte then announced 3 successive 6-month stays of the suspension before canceling the decision during U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's visit in Manila in July. The foreign policy inconsistency, the alternating pattern of anti-American outbursts and reaffirmations of the U.S. alliance is very much par for the course for this past 6 years under Duterte. While U.S. officials will appreciate Manila's show of support, many also will be relieved that the administration's term is rapidly coming to an end. So there you have it. Again, that was one of several articles, outlining what President Duterte had to say. I found it interesting that President of the Philippines is mentioning the Ukraine conflict and the possibility of it spilling over into his part of the world. Again, we live in very crazy times, guys, and we have to keep our ears to the ground. I know a lot of you guys are over there already. We're waiting to go through the pandemic. You guys are there already. Just stay alert. Stay apprised. I know you're there. You're happy to be there, but keep your ear to the ground on what's going on around the world. I'm watching China, this China thing with Taiwan. Hopefully none of these scenarios are going to come to fruition, and things are eventually going to settle down in the Ukraine, hopefully. But back to this article, I thought that was interesting. I posted a link to the same article in the community section of this YouTube channel, which you can find, but I'll also include it in the description of this video, as well as you've seen some screenshots of it. And check it out, share it. It's definitely eye-opening, and it reiterates what I've been saying, is to just stay alert. It's definitely troubling times. I think I was mentioning about the airline flights. The Allies, the U.S. and the Allies, have shut down their airspaces to Russian airliners. Well, when we fly out of New York to the Philippines, we go up through Canada, over Alaska. We fly through Russian airspace and into Chinese airspace, and we come out on the other side. So at first thought of that made me a little uneasy, given what had happened over the Ukraine some years back with a Malaysian airliner was shot out of the sky by Russian missiles. It made me a little uneasy to think about potentially flying into Russian airspace to get to the Philippines. More than likely, I'm going to be flying, every time you go fly there, it's usually not a U.S. flag carrier. It's generally, a foreign airline that you fly. But still, again, this was a Malaysian airline flight that was shot down over the Ukraine. So definitely concerning, to say the least. These tensions are concerning. But I would say, and I know someone commented about this as well, Turkish Airlines. Turkish Airlines seems to be the airline of choice. I know I got a comment about some concerns perhaps about having a layover in Istanbul on the way to the Philippines for 5 or 6 hours. There was one of the very popular vloggers that live in Manila. They had posted their trip, and they took Turkish Airlines. They flew business class, but still, it's a very nice airline. Istanbul is a beautiful airport. I think that is very doable. It keeps coming up as I do I always search to get the prices of what's happening, trying to stay apprised of the airline costs. And this Turkish Airlines flights out of New York keep coming up. And I would think that that's more like flying to like Europe first. I would think that the flights go in the other direction over the Atlantic into Europe that way. And I think you might be a little better off if you're concerned about flying through Russian airspace. But just a thought. I'm not sure what those flight paths are. If anybody does know, if anybody has flown Turkish Airlines and you know the flight path from the U.S. To Istanbul and then on to Manila, share that for any of those like myself who are slightly concerned about having to fly through Russian airspace with tensions being elevated. We're not going until the fall to the Philippines, so hopefully either the trip's going to be off because the world's going to be at war, or things are going to simmer down and back to normal and we won't have to worry. And we hope that is what the situation will be then. I was reading earlier about another COVID variant. It was Deltacron. I don't know if anybody's heard of Deltacron yet, but apparently it's there's some cases in the UK. Hopefully we're not going to see a resurgence of COVID in the fall in the form of Deltacron. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but again, I tend to try to keep my ear to the ground with all of this stuff because I know I've got a trip coming up and then we've got the family over there that we've not seen since 2019. So I'm looking at all these different scenarios to try to make sure that our trip happens, and you all who aren't in the Philippines yet should be doing the same thing because things are out of control right now. But with that being said, we're going to wrap this video up. If you got something out of it, if you liked it, please give it a like. Please subscribe if you haven't already and hit the bell icon so you get notified of all the future uploads, including our Philippines trip that's coming up. And as we always like to say at USA to Philippines Life channel, wherever you are in the world, stay well, stay safe, stay blessed, stay informed in this crazy world. And we'll see you real soon. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.